We're about to discuss the very popular knight b6 mainline. But before we do that, I'd like to show you some sidelines and options black would have after knight b6, knight c3. Very much discussed and popular line here is queen e6, which we consider as a main line, and we will cover in the next video. The idea behind this move is quite clear. The queen opens up the diagonal for the bishop on f8, and herself on e6 stands quite well. As long as there is nobody to kick her out, she is very comfortable on e6. Other very logical options and moves for black are bishop b7, bishop a6, a5, and g6. Let's start to take a look what this g6 is about. It seems that black would have very easy life after bishop g7 and castle. Our pawn on e5 would be very weak, but we should not allow easy development for black. That is why we would play in this position knight e4. That's a very powerful move. We want to give a check on f6, a trap that the pawn on e5 is not hanging. Queen e5 would be a big blunder because after knight f6, black would lose her majesty on e5. That's why black is forced to play bishop g7. And I like this move knight e4 not only because there was a threat of knight f6 and the trap of winning the queen, but also it supports bishop to go to g5. Bishop g5, once again, queen e5 is not possible, not because of knight f6. Knight f6 would be just an exchange of pieces, bishop f6, queen e2, and bishop e2. White did not win any material, but a very powerful move on queen e5 would be bishop f6. That's a beautiful idea of double attack, and of course black cannot take bishop f6, knight f6. Once again, her majesty is lost on e5, and after bishop f6, let's say queen e6, then white just takes the bishop on g7, and soon the game will be finished into 1-0. After bishop g5, it's very important to give a check. Queen b4. If black doesn't give a check and plays normal move like, I don't know, let's say queen e6, then it would be quite tough for black after long castle or knight f6. Knight f6 looks great, bishop f6 and bishop f6. It is very bad for black. Short castle would be very scary because after queen d2, I don't know how black can defend the mate ideas. Otherwise, if after bishop f6, rook g8, you can see yourself, it is a very passive, awful, completely awful position for black. That's why check wins kind of a tempo, a time to castle next move. Queen d2. We of course don't want to move our king. And after queen d2, then we take the queen with the king, because we exchanged the queens and we know that in endgames, king is important to be in the center. I think this position is quite pleasant for white because black, first of all, has very bad piece on b6. Knight b6 is quite passive one. The pawn structure is much better for white, and one thing we have to know here is that we did not blunder the e5 pawn. Bishop e5 would not be good because of check on f6, king f8. Bishop f6 is bad not because of bishop f6. We have to be careful because bishop f6 would be bad because black is able to castle. But instead of bishop f6, we have an intermezzo, rook e1 check, king f8, and now bishop f6, and this looks lovely for white. Look at black's position, two bishops. Yes, they do have an extra pawn, but look at the king, and all pieces are on the bad squares. Knight b6 again. It's a big problem in this position. It's a big problem for black to have knight on b6. Also, our bishop on f6 is super awesome, and it is clear advantage for white. So after bishop e5, knight f6, king f8, then we would play bishop h6 check once again, king e7, bishop g7, and now we see that this rook has big problems on h8. There is no good square other than d8. Rook d8, rook e1, pinning the bishop, and d6 does not help because of move f4, and we're winning the piece. Take a look at this position once again. With check, check, black just loses the piece automatically. Check, king f8, check, with threats. All the moves have threat. Knight f6 was check, bishop h6 check, bishop g7 is threatening to take the rook on h8, rook d8, and now rook e1. Big problem for black, but he himself created it. He was greedy and took on e5, d6, oh, sorry, where did I go? Here, d6, and f4 wins this bishop, greedy bishop on e5. Okay, g6 is not that dangerous for us, but you have to pay attention that if black is planning some slow development, and you see that after this development black would be completely fine, then of course we have to hurry up and do something. That's what knight e4 was about after g6. Let's take a look at the move a5. What is this a5? a5 has an idea to develop bishop on a6, but having the pawn not on a7 but on a5, where it feels that it has much more point, because b3 would run into a4, and basically a5, a4, gaining some space on the queen side is good for black. Here we have to do something on the king side. We cannot allow black just to develop that nicely. f4, bishop a6, the c4 pawn is hanging, so we have to play b3, and a4 is met with queen e3. Yes, black achieved what he wanted. a5, bishop a6, a4, it's there. But then what? We have beautiful center. e5 pawn is very good on this square, because first of all it takes some squares from the black pieces, and also we have space. Once the pawn is, as far as the pawn is advanced, we have space. After queen e3, let's say AB would favor white, of course, because the A file is open, and there is it's open for us, not for black. Queen b4 here to threaten to take on b3 would not be a big deal for us, because here it's important not to play rook b1 and moves like this, because let's say rook b1, then queen a5 would be a bit unpleasant for us with the idea of bishop b4. But here, after queen b4, to play move queen d2. And the idea behind this move is that queen b3 is a bad move. It's not hanging because of rook b1, and where does this queen go? It's trapped. Knight c4 would not work because after rook b3, knight d2 and bishop d2 or king d2 wins the piece. So there is no need, absolutely no need to defend the pawn on b3. And if there is no direct attack on the queen side, then I can definitely say that this position is plus equal for white. All right, let's get to two bishop moves, bishop b7 and bishop a6. Bishop a6 is also a very logical move. b3. Here another point, another idea for white can be queen e4. Looks like very logical move. We are opening up the diagonal for the f1 bishop, and also we are defending the c4 pawn. f6, e takes f6, queen e4, knight e4, and g takes f6. Yes, black is sacrificing the pawn on f6, but he would get a nice compensation, I would say, because the files, the diagonals would be open for black pieces, and we're still not developed completely. We still have problems with the king on e1, and we still need to find good squares for our bishops. Knight f6, king f7, knight h5. As you can see, we lost a lot of tempos, but we won a pawn, it's true. Bishop b4 check, very unpleasant. King d1, bishop c4, and knight c4. Now we don't have the pawn anymore, and black's position looks very, very fine. This was the game between Hracek Karyak in 2014. King c2 was played, and after king c2, a5 was a very nice move with a very complex position, I would say. Yeah, we have g and f pawn, and if we advance them, it's gonna be great for us, but so far we still need to develop, and it's not so easy. Black might attack on g and f file, and I would think that this position is close to equal, but is very dynamic. But of course queen e4 is quite possible to play. Though I would prefer to play b3, long castle, bishop b2. Rook e8. This was black's idea to develop with tempos and just attack our e5 pawn. f4, f6. Now we go for long castle, and we sacrifice this pawn on e5. We don't move our knight, let's say knight e4, just to defend the pawn on e5, because after f takes e5, f takes e5, d5 would be very, very strong for black. Take a look. This break, d5 break, is always something very powerful if it works. We cannot take ed6 because the knight is hanging on e4. cd6, cd5 also not possible because the queen is quite pinned on e2. Knight d2 is the only move that we can make, and now after g6, bishop g7 comes, and there is no way that white can comfortably develop and comfortably defend the e5 pawn. Pieces, black pieces, would be very strong, and our pawns would get weaker and weaker. So after f6, we should ignore that the pawn is hanging on e5. Black takes on e5, takes the pawn with the queen, queen e5, rook e5. And here we should use the fact that black pieces are not on ideal squares. Once again, in Scotch, after knight b6, this knight becomes a big problem if there is no break in the center and he does not have a pressure on c4 pawn. That's why here we would play move a4. Gains some space on the queen side, and after move d6, g3. Now the problem is, let's say, first of all, I forgot to cover the move like bishop b4. Very logical. Thinking I'm not allowing a5 in any time soon, but bishop b4 would be very bad due to knight a2. And there is double attack on the b4 and e5. Rook, that's why after a4 this square is not that appealing for black. But let's say bishop c5 is possible to play, though after bishop c5, a5 can be a bit problematic for black, or simple bishop d3, rook f1, white would have great compensation for the pawn. That's why after a4, d6 is more solid option, g3 and rook e8. It's time to get rid of this threat of knight going somewhere. Bishop h3, knight d7. Well, knight d7 is quite logical move. Also, it was possible to play something like king b8, but then a5 would be very strong, and after, let's say, knight c7, bishop d7 loses this pawn on c6. So bishop h3, knight d7, rook he1. We should not allow easy development for black, otherwise we would be just pawn down. Rook e1, rook e1. Instead of rook e1, if, let's say, bishop e7 with the idea of bishop f6, knight e4 would be very strong. And of course, move like, let's say, rook g8 to defend this g7 pawn is very bad, because we have this nice threat on c5 winning the piece, and king b7 doesn't help because we have a square to escape knight b4. So after rook he1, rook e1, rook e1, king d8. Of course, it is very logical that king goes to d8, supports bishop e7, and of course it controls the e8 square. Knight e2. Now bishop cannot develop to e7 because the g7 pawn is hanging, and knight e5 was played in the game Jones Rager, Vaikansei 2017. Here, I think this position is quite complex, and if you turn on the engine, you will get 0, 0, 0. And you might think that, okay, why did I play this type of sharp and complex position if I get 0, 0, 0 on the engine evaluation? But of course, we are pawn down, and when you're pawn down and you have your material down and you see the engine evaluation 0, that's a perfect news, because there is a great compensation for it. I would love to play this position with white. After knight e2, knight e5 was a little inaccuracy, but you see that it's very easy for such top players like Rager to play knight e5 and not knight c5, which was much more precise to play king c2 and bishop c8 to get rid of this bishop on a6, which was not doing anything. Bishop c8, king c8, and rook f1. I think that white has great power on f-file. Rook f7 is the idea, can be the next move, depends what black will play. G7 pawn is still weak, and yeah, we're pawn down, and yes, black has, there are not many pieces on the board, but first of all, this extra pawn is double pawn, and we have much more free space and ideal square for our pieces rather than black. After knight e2 and knight e5, knight f4 was very nice because it defends the d3 square. Also knight e6 can be annoying. Bishop c8, the same idea to exchange the bishops, take, and bishop e5, d5, and knight d3, bishop d6, and here b4. White won a great, really brilliant game. John simply slowly but surely got some pluses here, some pluses there, and then converted it into a beautiful point. That was it for bishop a6, and now it's time to take a look at bishop b7 move. Bishop d2. We would like to castle long side, and after long castle, instead of long castle, there is of course a possibility to play g6 once again. Now knight e4 is a possibility, but I like, and I think it's very interesting move that was played in the game between Nc3 2011. Move h4. h4 is very nice move. h5 is idea in some cases. Some cases bishop g5 is the idea. Bishop g7, long castle and short castle. Once again, queen e5 here would lose a piece after queen e5, bishop e5, and rook e1. f4 is coming, and bishop e5 would also be bad because of rook e1. Bishop f6 here would not help because we can simply move the queen and we're winning the queen on e7. So after long castle, short castle, h5, queen e5, we have to realize that in Scotch we should not count pawns. If we have an attack, we have to take care of the attack. So this e5 pawn is some kind of trap for black to take it and lose time on taking it, and meanwhile we would get a very dangerous attack on the king side. Queen g4, d5, h takes, and c5. Once again, the big problem of the knight on b6. Knight c4 had to be played, otherwise knight c8 would look very ugly. Knight c4, bishop c4, d takes c4. We don't want to take this pawn. There is no time for that. Instead, rook de1 was played in the game, queen d4, and queen h3. After queen h3, there is a big threat on h7. Rook fe8 is the only move, queen h7, and king f8. And this game was concluded in a very beautiful way. Bishop h6, rook e1, bishop h6, queen h6, and queen g7 would not do its work here, just because queen can go to f4, and look at these pawns, look at the bishop. It's complete disaster for black. King g8 also is not that great because after knight e4 we're defending the c5 pawn, and also we have a great, very powerful idea of g4, g5. Rook d8 and g4, g5 and knight f6, the game is completely lost. Thus, after bishop d2, long castle, and let's say just an example here of king b8. Now, once again, there is both sides castled on long side, and we cannot start slow development or something. Once again, something powerful is needed, and this something powerful is h4. You have to remember these ideas of h4 because it is very important to support this bishop to go to g5. Rook e8, bishop g5 was a threat, rook e8, and now rook h3. So h4 served two purposes: to support bishop g5 and to play rook h3. Bishop h6, queen g4. Bishop c8 would not help because after rook g3, queen c5 and queen f4, I think is an improvement on the game of Sugirov Sashikiran 2012. In the game of Sugirov was played knight e4, and after queen e5, the game was lost with white pieces. That's why it is important not to give up the things so easily. And after rook g3, queen g5, play queen f4. And if black takes the pawn on e5, either with the rook or with the queen, then f7 pawn is dropping. And I consider this position quite pleasant for white. Our pieces have more space, and also the rook on third file is very powerful. Once again, big problem of the knight on b6, and moves like rook e3, rook e1, bishop f4, bishop d3 is our usual ideas. This is it for the sidelines of knight b6 main line. In the next video you will see the main move queen e6, and we will discuss the main ideas, main maneuvers and plans for white. For these sidelines, it is important to remember few key moments. That on g6 you go knight e4 and do not allow easy development for black. After a5 you ignore that black wants to play a4 and bishop a6. You just develop normally with f4, bishop a6 and play b3. And a4 is not that big deal because after queen e3 white can develop very easily. And after bishop a6, b3, long castle, bishop b2, rook e8 and f4, f6, it is important not to defend this pawn, just ignore the threat and go long castle. As for the main line of the sidelines, bishop b7, bishop d2 and long castle, king b8, it's important to remember this idea, h4. Bishop g5 we want, sorry, and rook h3 is also great for this position. So let's discuss the main move queen e6 in the next video, and see you soon.